Welcome to the Manufacturing Matters podcast with the Council of Industry. Join us as we bring you inspiring stories, interviews, and insights from across the Hudson Valley that will revolutionize the way you think about manufacturing. This podcast is proudly sponsored by PKF O'Connor Davies, a leading accounting and advisory firm dedicated to helping businesses thrive in the manufacturing sector. With their industry knowledge and strategic guidance, PKF O'Connor Davies ensures that manufacturers have the financial insights and support they need to achieve success.
David Carter, Executive Director of MTEC. Welcome to the Council of Industry podcast.
Thank you, Harold. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the invite.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about MTEC. What do you guys do and what geography do you cover? Tell us all about it.
Well, MTEC, better known as Manufacturer Technology and Enterprise Center, is located here in Newburgh, New York. We've been around since 1988, so we've been in existence for 30 plus years. We are part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, or MEP for short. And what MEP is a national coalition of independent manufacturing consultants. So we provide manufacturing consulting services for manufacturers in the Hudson Valley. And some of the partners that we deal with, from early stage manufacturers, startup manufacturers, right on up to long-standing, fully developed manufacturers. And our role at MTEC is really to help manufacturers with their tougher problems, their challenges, and opportunities. And we do that in a couple of key ways. My team and I provide engineering consulting services for manufacturers. We also have a broad network of service providers that can really step and help manufacturers and whatever their challenges or opportunities are that they're trying to tackle. So we provide that expertise. And another thing that we help manufacturers with, and is really critical, is access to capital. And that can be through venture capitalists, angel investors, local banks, or grants. In a lot of cases, we get access to grants that will help us provide the manufacturers solutions at little to no cost. So, does that give you an overview of who we are?
Yeah, sure. And I think some of our listeners might have known you by your previous name, which it's been a while, but the Hudson Valley Technology Development Center, I think, was the 1988 to when, like 2018, something like that version?
Yes, so thank you for pointing that out. That precluded me, Harold. I joined the team, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, but I joined the team about a year ago. But since then, I've worked with you and other partners in the Hudson Valley, and I'm glad to be here and to share more with listeners on what we do.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess a little bit of the context of the organization, it does receive a little bit of funding, right, from both the federal and state governments. Is that right? That's part of that, this MEP world? Yeah.
And let me just kind of elaborate on that. I mentioned earlier how we have access to grants, and some of those grants, they come in a couple of forms, primarily either at a state level or federal level. And MTEC, like all the other MEPs, have access to federal and state funding to help us operate as a nonprofit. So that funding helps us keep our costs down and pass those savings on to the manufacturers that we're here to assist.
Right. And you mentioned the federal network of the manufacturing extension partners, but there's a state network as well, right?
Yeah, it trickles down. The program is part of NIST, so it is a federal program, but it's executed at the state level. So at the state level, MEP is executed by NISTAR out of Albany. And then if we look at the state as a whole, there's 11 independent centers. So while we're affiliated with the states, we are not a state-run operation. We're an independent operation, and MTEC is one of 11 that covers New York State. And again, we each have our own geographical area. To that point, I think it's probably important to note for the listeners, MTEC is in charge of, or responsible for, Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, Sullivan, Ulster, and Westchester. So if you're out there listening and you need our help in those counties, we'd be more than glad to help. But as importantly, if you aren't in those counties, please let MTEC know, and I can put you in touch with the right MEP center within New York State.
Terrific. So you mentioned you've been here for a little less than a year. Tell us a little bit about your background. It's a little varied.
Yeah, it's varied, but it's similar in a lot of regards. For the most part, most of my career has been in business development, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. But previous to that, I worked for General Electric out of Schenectady as a tool and die machinist. So I'm very familiar with manufacturing. Worked for General Electric for about 3 years. It was a great program, learned a lot about manufacturing from there. I went on and got a degree in business and got into the world of business development. And that's really where I spent my previous 30 years, really split equally between two big multinational companies that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. I worked for both Sony, and then from there, I worked for Samsung. And that really was the bulk of my 30-year career with those two companies. And again, I worked in the role of business development, and I think how that has prepared me for this next step in my career is, for those of you not familiar with business development, it's really broken down into 4 key components. And the first one is manufacturing and product viability. So working for companies like Sony and Samsung, we brought a lot of products to market, but what I think the typical end user didn't see is everything that goes on behind the scenes as far as developing the products, vetting the products with the end user, be it a commercial or consumer application, and deciding, is this product ready to come to market? And then once we did decide if a product was ready to come to market, then really that's when the next 3 key steps would kick in. That we would develop a business plan, which is really the sales and marketing that has to go behind bringing a product into the U.S. market. And just to give you context, I was in charge of the U.S. in that role. So a little different geographic region than what I'm used to now, but very much the same principles, right? You would develop a product, do viability testing. Once you knew the product was ready to bring to market, then it was a matter of bringing it to market through sales, marketing, and distribution. So that kept me busy for 30 years.
That's, I would think, quite a bit. What are some of the products we might know that you've handled?
Oh, is like I like to tell people, anything from Samsung or Sony that you have in your house,
okay,
that's responsible for. But then, other products, more commercial applications that the user wouldn't be familiar with or may not associate with the Sony or Samsung, is these big displays that you see every place you go, what we call public displays. So if you're in an airport, if you're in a hotel lobby, if you're in a restaurant, these screens that you see everywhere, that was a big, big piece of both Samsung's and Sony's business. So I got quite involved both on the consumer side as well as the commercial side, which tended to be more technical, and how would we provide integrated solutions with other partners.
Okay, interesting. So how do those skills transfer to, what do you bring to MTEC?
Great question. So I think what I bring to MTEC is, 30 years of business development experience. And that's how I like to say, business development is really a tip of the spear, right? If you don't have business development, it doesn't matter if you're a manufacturer, whatever business you might be in. It's just the foundation of driving a business. And I'll give you an example. Currently, I'm working with a startup company. We're helping them at MTEC through our engineering and consulting services develop a prototype. So again, similar to what I did in my old role and doing product feasibility tests. So we're developing prototype for the person. We're developing a go-to-market strategy for this person, and helping them take their business from, the startup to the next stage. And going through that process with this person, I've really drawn on my previous experience.
Interesting. And with some of the other team members, what are some of the other skills that are helping clients?
Yeah, we have a diverse team. We have some young people. We have some veterans, right? And I think that's really what strengthens an organization. So a couple of veterans we have on our team is Bob and Serto. Bob has been with MTEC for over 15 years now. We have the good fortune, Bob was, in his prior life, was an engineer at IBM. So he is much like myself. We operated on a much bigger stage before coming to MTEC, but I think it really equipped him well to assist our clients, regardless of whatever stage they might be in with their project, with their engineering needs. So glad to have Bob on my team. Heading up our business development and marketing is Phyllis Levine. Phyllis is a veteran, has been with us for over 25 years now, and she's invaluable to the organization. But Phyllis, as leading business development, helps me with the sales and the marketing aspect. I have Charles Waldwin. He's from banking, longtime banking background, joined us about a year ago, and he's doing business development. He's our lead salesperson. And with his banking background, he's very well equipped to talk to all sorts of types of manufacturers, because that's what he did in banking. And he can advise manufacturers on a number of topics. So again, glad to have him. Christine Mixel, been with the team for about 5 years now, heads up our operations. So like I like to say, she's the foundation. She is what keeps the operation running. So I can go out and Bob can go out and Charles and Phyllis and reach out and work with clients. And then last but not least, rounding out the MTEC team is Annie McCarran. Annie has been with the company for about a year now, and she heads up our data analytics, which is critical in helping us understand who our manufacturers are in the Valley and how to best reach out to them. I like to say we're small but mighty. The strength is both in the diversity we have in the team, but as well as the network, our nationwide network that we can tap into.
Right.
So
walk us through, you're somewhat familiar with the kinds of members at the Council of Industry, also a very diverse group, from 15 employees to how many does IBM have? 400,000. So, but in the Hudson Valley, maybe a typical company might have 75 to 100 employees. They've got, varied product lines. How would someone use your services? Kind of walk us through that contact. You meet with them and they say, yeah, I think we probably have some challenges. We'd like to talk to you. What happens next?
Well, it kind of depends on.
Yeah, paint a couple of those different scenarios, right? As it depends. Sure.
Sometimes clients come to us with a very specific need. And I won't say it's easier to tackle, but they have a good handle on what their opportunity, their challenge might be. And then really is more of an interviewing process. My prior life, we call it root cause analysis. But, using you for an example, if you're a manufacturer, you might call me in or my team in to discuss the problem that you're faced with and getting our advice. So generally speaking, we vet through what the problem or challenge might be, make sure that it is actually what you think it is and not something else behind the scenes.
Sure.
So that's what I mean by root cause analysis. And then from there, if we have the expertise in-house, so a lot of the work we do does surface around or center around engineering needs. In those cases, Bob and his team will engage with the client. And, it's process improvement 101. We've identified the problems. Let's lay out a plan to address these problems to get us from point A to point B and execute against them. So those instances are pretty cut and dry. There's other times, though, where the manufacturer will reach out to us, and I give them credit. They know they have challenges, but they really can't pinpoint what's holding them, right? And look, sometimes that happens because as much as we like to think business is cut and dry, sometimes it can be kind of
I can imagine even within their leadership team, there's different opinions on what the problem is and what the potential solution might be.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Harold. So sometimes we do walk into organizations where not everybody's aligned. Yeah, and like you're signaling a lot of finger pointing. So, that's really my background, right, in business development, because a big part of business development is working with multiple partners, and partners don't always see eye to eye. They can be external partners or internal partners within a company. But in those instances, we help vet the problem out, bring them through an interviewing process that get all the critical people involved, both with the intent of getting people on the same page as far as the next steps. So, some of the work we do is very short cycled, 30 days or less. But then we have projects that go on literally for years, right? We have clients that we've been engaged with for 3, 4, 5 years. So it really runs the gamut from that standpoint. And that's part of what makes the job so exciting to me.
Yeah, I'm familiar with companies that are, kind of continuously going back to you for help, and just whatever the next challenge is, they're just helping them implement something that they need done. I know you've got a lot of repeat business there. So what are you seeing? I mean, so if you've only been here 10 months, so it's maybe not fair to say, but what are the kinds of projects? What's the trends that you're seeing? What are the challenges that the manufacturing clients are seeing?
Yeah, there's a couple that have really emerged. I think the biggest one, and from what I'm hearing from others, this has been a challenge for quite some time, is workforce development.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear repeatedly from all types of manufacturers, the challenge that they're faced with is how do we attract talent? How do we develop talent and hold on to talent, right? Because let's face it, at the end of the day, if you're in manufacturing, that your people are everything. So that's a big challenge that I've seen out there. Unfortunately, with cyber threats, the cybersecurity is a bigger and bigger concern. And, initially the thought was, well, it's more for companies that deal with sensitive information and deal with entities like the Department of Defense, where security is utmost. But what we're finding is everybody and anybody is at threat of cybersecurity. So we're doing a lot of cyber. I don't see that going away. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to see an increase in the need for that. We like to say we need to stay one step ahead of the bad people out there that are trying to hack and take our information.
It's increasingly difficult. There's more of them, and they have more tools.
Fortunately, but we're doing our best, Harold. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, last season we had Mo Talib on from CISA, and he was both reassuring and really putting the fear of God in everybody you talk to. So it was there are some challenges and some tools out there, but yeah. So workforce, cyber. What else are you hearing?
Then advanced materials and sustainability with a lot of manufacturers. That's very critical to them. So we're doing a lot of work around finding better ways to manufacture products more efficiently, right? So less energy, sustainable products. That's been a big focus. Again, I'm going to continue to see that grow. The thing that amazed me is, even though I've lived in New York State most of my life, now that I'm working regionally, I had, especially in the Hudson Valley, just the proliferation of food and beverage manufacturers that are out there. And so that's part of the work that I do, is working with food and beverage manufacturers. And again, it can be in a traditional sense where we're coming in and helping them operate more efficiently. So we're doing lean work with them. But then we do some interesting things like food safety. That's certainly paramount if you're in that business.
Sure.
And then we're doing a lot of business development work, because these food and beverage manufacturers, most all of them are consumer facing, and then they do some commercial production as well. So that's where my background comes in handy, because I work for companies that operated both on the commercial side or industrial side as well as the consumer side.
Gotcha. So what's the mix at this point? I know you mentioned that you're personally working with a startup, and that obviously have food and beverage clients, other clients. What's the mix of kind of that startup to more established businesses?
That's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked me, because when I joined the operation, I was really tasked in getting the word out there. And to that degree, I do want to personally thank the Council of Industry and you, Harold, because you gave me some good advice on how to go about that.
Good.
As we reached out and started to reach a broader base of customers, I found new customers emerging that we hadn't dealt with in the past. So, on any given year, we're going to interface MTEC with probably about 300 or so manufacturers. And that's a lot, but it's important to note that if you look in the 7-county region, there's about 2,000 manufacturers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What that points out to me is opportunity. If we're only touching 300 or under 300 of them, how do we reach the other 1,700? But,
when you figure that out, please let me know.
Yeah, well, I'm relying on you, Harold, but maybe we can figure it out together. But kind of a long answer to a short question. As we cast a broader net, traditionally we had worked with, I would say, manufacturers that had been in business for at least 5 years or more, and an average employee count of 50 to about 100. But as we did more outreach in the marketplace, we're coming across a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more startups. So that's really changed our focus in a good way, right? Because before we were largely dependent upon working with existing manufacturers or mature manufacturers, but really one of the things that MEP is charged with is how do we help these startups and early stage manufacturers? So short answer is currently about 75% of our portfolio is on, long-standing existing manufacturers of 5 years or more. But about another 25% is on these startups in early stage. And if you take a step back to a year ago before I joined, it was less than 10% on startup early stage. I'm glad with the inroads that we've made there.
That's great. And from the MEP mission, I know that it is a dual mission in terms of, technology. Honestly, your organization was called the Technology Development Center, right? So, and that still is a focus. So there is an emphasis on emerging technologies. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. It's always about emerging technologies. I think, but one of the things I'm really focused on, Harold, being new to the role, not only learning what the current needs are in the marketplace and who the manufacturers are that need our help, but where's it going in the mid-range, right? So that we can evolve as a support organization, as somebody that provides consulting services, and making sure that we have the right services to meet the manufacturer's needs.
Right. Well, that is, that crystal ball it's elusive. Mine never seems to be turned on or operating correctly, but if you have it, it is very helpful.
Yeah. The world I came from, we used the crystal ball analogy a lot. The other one, the ability to see around corners. So
that's funny.
It's part art, part science.
So, David, thank you very much. Any parting thoughts? It's been a pleasure working with you these first 10 months. I know we're looking forward to continuing to working with MTEC and going forward.
I think parting thoughts, first and foremost, on a personal note, thank you again for having me here, Harold. But more importantly, the council has been there to advise me since the get-go, since day one, both you and Johnny Ann and your team. So just want to thank you publicly. And
appreciate that.
For those of you out there listening that aren't familiar or aren't a member of the Council of Industry, I highly recommend that you look into it because, like I said, they've really helped MTEC and myself move our business forward so we can better service the manufacturers in the Hudson Valley.
Well, I appreciate that very much. So David Carter, Executive Director of MTEC, the Manufacturing Technology Enterprise Center. Thank you for being on the Council of Industry podcast.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Harold.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Manufacturing Matters, brought to you by the Council of Industry and sponsored by PKF O'Connor Davies, accountants and advisors who understand the unique challenges and opportunities in the manufacturing sector. We hope you gained valuable insights and inspiration from today's discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.